There's two videos I want to go over for Nvidia here on April 21st, 2025, one from Yahoo Finance and then the other from CNBC. The first title is going to be Nvidia US basically handed the Chinese AI market to Huawei, analyst says, and then Nvidia remains our top AI pick, says Intelligent Alpha Doug Clinton. So let's go ahead and start off with this video here.
Nvidia stocks sinking again today. This is coming after a report from Reuters saying China's Huawei is boosting AI chip production. For more now, we're going to bring in Stacy Razgon, Managing Director and Senior Analyst at Bernstein. Stacy, always great to have you on the program. So we have these reports. China's Huawei planning a new AI chip, they say, for mass shipment. It's from Reuters. Yeah. I'm looking at Nvidia. We're down about 6% in today's trade, Stacy. You cover the name. What'd you make of that headline?
To be honest, I don't see why it matters. Nvidia's not allowed to sell anything in China anymore as it relates to AI, so who cares? Right? I mean, to be honest, this was my issue with the ban that we got last week on Nvidia's China offerings. They've already been heavily constrained by export controls. The part that they were allowed to sell in China, it was called H20. The performance was already very limited. And the parts that Huawei had available actually they have better performance. They're missing some other things, software compatibility, but they have better performance. After last week, then the government is now requiring licenses for NVIDIA even to ship that low-end part. So effectively, they can't ship any AI parts into China anymore. So, I mean, to be honest, we've basically just handed the China AI market to Huawei anyway. So, I'm not surprised by any of this at all. And at least from where we're standing now, I don't know that it matters. Like I said, they can't compete anyways. They're not allowed.
I mean, so let's assume, Stacy, that policies are not permanent, right? And that you get a change in administration in a few years and things change again. Does this give Huawei such a head start that even if the policy changes, it'll give it a leg up? How are you thinking sort of longer term?
Yes and no. You have to remember the policies that were in place until last week were actually put there under the Biden administration, not under the Trump administration. And so that low-end part that NVIDIA was allowed to ship until last week was already well below, Huawei's offerings. And frankly, I doubt that those thresholds were ever going to get raised. And so the gap between, what NVIDIA was allowed to ship and frankly, the local capabilities was going to get bigger and bigger over time anyways. So no, I think we were going down this path as it stands. NVIDIA has even talked about the China market gets more and more competitive. And you can even look at their sales into China. I think they did about 17 billion last year. It was probably about 12 billion in AI sales. That was the largest on an absolute basis that they've ever shipped. But as a percentage of their total revenue, was the lowest in over 10 years. Right, so China increasingly was becoming less important to them. They were getting decoupled because of the nature of these policies that were put in place. And again, it wasn't really Trump until recently. This was the Biden administration.
Stacey, I'm looking at shares of Nvidia back at the chart. We're down now about 30% this year. I mean, it's a whole lot worse than the NASDAQ 100. I know you're a believer, you're a bull on this one, Stacey. I mean, what is the catalyst that you think gets this one moving in the right direction again?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem right now, because I do think it's funny, in the wake of all of the tariff stuff, I could argue that whereas tariffs and macro uncertainty, everything can cause real demand issues for a lot of markets, I actually think the AI demand has been real, right? So you could argue that will continue. I would also argue that, just from a pure hardware standpoint, given the nature of how everything is structured, the AI servers are probably a little less exposed to the direct tariff risk than some of the other end markets. They can come in through, most of the ones going into the US at least come in through Mexico, and they're compliant under the USMCA. They're actually tariff free. They're exempt from all the tariffs. So it's actually like fundamentally, it feels like AI should have a better backdrop than a lot of other end markets. But because of some of these policy, changes that have been put into place, and also just the broader worries about macro and everything else, they've been getting hit worse.
Well, and what about this sort of, there have been some reports bubbling up about some of the big hyperscalers like a Microsoft or Amazon today. There's an analyst report that they're considering sort of pulling back on some of that big data center spending. How worried are you about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I actually don't think that spending this year changes very much. I think that what was in the books is going to be in the books. But look, there's been always worries that are we at a CapEx peak? And a lot of people, even before all the tariffs, people were worried that, could 2026 CapEx come under pressure just because they were investing so much in 2025? They worry about a digestion. I mean, look, at the end of the day, they're macro exposed like everybody else. I mean, is it possible that CapEx could be down in 26 because of macro issues? Sure. Is that an Nvidia specific issue? Absolutely not. Like, look, if we go into a recession and the way things are looking, like, who knows? I mean, I think all bets are off, but I don't think that those are isolated necessarily to AI spending or Nvidia. I think those are broad risks. And look, the longer this goes on, I think the bigger those risks are.
A kind of a broader question I have for you, Stacey. You know, the U.S. government, obviously, it imposes these export controls. We're trying to slow down Beijing's tech ambitions, chip ambitions. How effective do you think those export controls are going to prove to be?
I mean, they are and they aren't. So in the near term, does it throw up barriers? Sure. But at the same time, like the Chinese are not stupid, right? And we're forcing them down paths that maybe they would not have taken. Like I've said this before, but we're sort of forcing them to be creative in all senses of that word. And again, it's not just AI. It's AI. It's also semi-cap. It's analog semiconductors. It's all these things where there are increasingly like local domestic substitutes. And, you know, those substitutes, they are going to take more share than they would ordinarily deserve to take because they have no choice. They have to. And so, yes, does it slow them down? It probably does. But if I'm looking out, you know, 5 years or 10 years, might we be faced with a more competitive China because they were forced to be creative, because engineers tend to do their best work when they're under constraints, and because they are not stupid and they have no choice? I mean, yeah, I wonder if we're opening up gates that maybe in hindsight we'll have regretted pushing them through. It's certainly possible.
So, Stacey, there's one question that I imagine many of our viewers want to know, and that is whether they should buy Nvidia right now, given all of this and given the drop.
I mean, look, we still like the fundamental story. I like the story around AI demand. I still think that they are by far the winner in this space. I mean, but there's clearly like more uncertainty around everything. And again, like I said, it's not just Nvidia. Like it's, right. I mean, it's down a lot this year. The whole semiconductor industry is probably down, not quite as much, but almost as much as Nvidia. I mean, the sector's just gotten wrecked on all the tariff stuff. It's just one of the most global sectors that's out there, and it's both directly and indirectly. It's exposed and they get impacted. So my issue is right now, I don't know when all of this eases. But the thing is, it could ease tomorrow. It could ease literally with a tweet.
It could, although then another tweet will probably send it back down again.
Probably.
Such are the times we live in, Stacey. So hope you're doing lots of yoga or something.
All right, so here's the second video. And again, let us know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on this.
Under some pressure right now, largely driven by the tariff uncertainty. Joining us right now with more on that is Doug Clinton. He's the founder and CEO of Intelligent Alpha. Good morning to you. So we do have, by the way, we have lawsuits, antitrust cases. Maybe we're going to break up these tech companies. You got the Nvidia story. You got the Apple story. Is there any tech you like right now?
Andrew, it feels like nothing can really go right for big tech right now. It's all going against them all year. That's been the case. But in terms of big tech, what we like at Intelligent Alpha, where we do use AI to do our portfolio creation, Nvidia is still our top AI pick. And I know that is probably at this point exhausting to hear. The stock has not worked this year. It really hasn't worked the last 6 months. But I think if you look at the bottom line, 21 times forward earnings, I think those earnings are pretty solid. We've de-risked the China issue now with the H20 ban. And I don't think that the hyperscalers, no matter what happens in the economy, are going to stop spending on Nvidia chips. So that is still the name that our models are sticking with.
And you still think that Nvidia, I mean, one of the things, though, that we've been talking about for months now, by the way, including Andy Jassy, who was on the broadcast just last week, talking about how ultimately the price of these chips has to come down. Like, this whole thing doesn't really work unless the price comes down. And who would eat that price? Nvidia more than anybody else.
I think you'll see over time, and this happens always in tech, right? Prices come down and the ability of whether it's software or hardware improves over time. That's the story of technology. But I think the other side of the AI bull market is really, what is the consumer side? What is the enterprise side for demand for these products? And what we're seeing over the last 3 months, and I don't think this is being reflected in stocks at all, is that there is huge demand for these products. And I think it's increasing and even accelerating with the O3 model launched last week from OpenAI. You have Grok from xAI. You have Gemini's new model from Google. All three of them have said they have capacity constraints in terms of what they can serve to customers right now. I think the demand will be there to force more chip buying, even if prices do come down.
Is there anybody you like? So you like Nvidia a little bit, but what about, where do you land on Apple, for example?
We don't own Apple. So Nvidia is actually the only mega cap tech stock that we own in our Livermore ETF LIVR. And earlier this year, our models, our AI models that do the picking for that portfolio, shifted out of big tech except for Nvidia. And ironically, about 2 weeks ago, the biggest contrarian bet the models wanted to make is into gold. And so what we have right now in our model is sort of this barbell approach where we have AI stocks like Nvidia, we have Micron, TSM, and then we have a pretty heavy position in gold and gold miners. And so that's kind of how AI is viewing the world right now in terms of managing the risk and opportunity in the markets.
What would you tell the investor class that's sitting here watching us saying that owns an Apple, that owns an Alphabet, that owns a Meta? Would you say you don't want to be owning these things at all? I mean, if you were a hedge fund, would you be shorting these things?
I wouldn't short them at all, no. I think if I owned them, and I do own some of those stocks personally, I would say you hold on to them. And the way that we saw this kind of play out in 2023, I'll go rewind 2 years ago when we started thinking there could be a recession. In fact, I think it was consensus we would get a recession in 23. One of the plays that point in time was you just own the mega cap tech stocks because they're offensive and defensive at the same time. They have the upside of AI, and they have really strong balance sheets and products that consumers can't live without. If you did get the recession, that narrative might be relevant again here. If we do go into recessionary times, I think the big cap tech stocks are good to own.
With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the chart here for Nvidia. Nvidia here currently $96.14, down about a total of 5% today if you include the after hours. I do have major support here at $78, and again, now that we are below $117, pretty close to $96 support here. I am viewing this as a dip opportunity. Personally, in my own portfolio, I am adding a position into Nvidia between 117 and 96. If we drop down between 96 and 78, that's where I would personally add a bigger position. Let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are with Nvidia at these current prices, and on those two videos, let me know what your thoughts are with those feedbacks that they had there on YouTube. If you don't have a community yet, feel free to join our Discord. We do have a dedicated chat section for Nvidia. And again, it's free to join. We have over 32,000 people. Link down below in the description of the video. And if you're looking for live entries and exits on stocks and options, check out the Patreon link down below as well, since we do have a 90% off permanent discount celebrating our 5-year anniversary. Both Discord and Patreon are going to be linked down below in the description. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.